Hello, students of this class. I hope you guys are all doing very well in the situation of COVID-19 thing. And we talked about initially about the ERP, MRP, AI, deep learning, big data, and that was basically uh, to supply the contents in advance in case anyone, which I already know, some already contact me, want to do the video presentation, kind of like ASAP, get it out of the way. And that was why that class was recorded 1 week in advance. Excuse me, I forgot. I just had my breakfast again, and every time I had that, which is a big cereal, it just produces this effect, and I do apologize for that. It, it does not make me look as professional as I should. So anyway, back to the point. Um, we for this class, this content I believe is uh, needed for your essay or mini essay number 2, which is basically required to simulate the sales of a given 4PL service that you imagine yourself working for and sell to your customers. So the last essay was the essay was what internal communication business literature, and this one is external communication. So as far as the differences, between the two, please refer to the announce board, Blackboard in that system. It's all in detail, so I won't repeat here. Now let's get to the class contents of this one. Before we get to the, I guess the KPI, I believe would benefit if we review a little bit of the history of this more or less manufacturing related operation management. Back in the early 1950s, right after the last war, Japan was on its way, getting back to somewhat at least a regional industrial power, and came a long way to get where they are today. If you go to the antique shops in the United States, you would still be able to, run into some, from time to time, some little, I guess, art crafts, made in Japan. But you look at the back, it normally would say back then it was called occupied Japan, meaning the U.S. military forces occupied in Japan. So from there, they worked really hard. The whole Japanese, people on the whole, they worked together, really rallied together in solidarity. So when it came into like 1960s, the government and the people in Japan worked really hard to roll out their industrial products from, just merely some handcrafts. And of course, they started to make motorcycles and things like that. So they started a system called the Japanese pronounce. Okay, I'm not Japanese, but based on what I know, they pronounce that 2 Chinese character as Kanban. Whereas when he later, I think starting from the 1990s, came into the U.S. and then, of course, we Americans pronounced Kanban. The 2 Chinese character for the Chinese would have pronounced Kanban, right? But it is Chinese character, but it had nothing to do with the Chinese, because back then the Chinese were still in the hardcore communist system, which basically the government run the whole manufacturing, productions, operations, totally different system, totally different theory. nevertheless different practice. So that was not in China, but started from Japan. So let's just imagine we're in a little workshop. Japanese, Chinese, American, European, doesn't matter. Just the workshop. The workshop's a workshop, right? So you have the bunch of guys working on the manufacturing of certain things. Let's just say this little, mouse thing. And to manufacture anything, you need the raw materials, you need the components, you need the parts. Parts a lot of time either manufacturing other shops in the same manufacturing place, or you just actually order from third party, especially lately, I think the global supply chain and all that. So, but the problem, well, not a problem. It could be a problem though. So, can you supply all that raw material and the components and parts all to the manufacturing production capacity at exactly the same pace? How much this demand is supplied in a perfect quantity and the pace of supply steadily, right? So if that happened, then there's no waste of time for the guys sitting there we're just waiting for the supplies. We can't do nothing until they arrive. So this system basically in essence boxes of different color as color coded or label or color coded and labeled boxes. In America we call it a bins. Okay, you put different things in different bins in a color coded differentiated system and keep them coming. Okay, part A, part B, part C, and then component 1, 2, 3, and then the raw materials and blah blah blah. So they keep coming. So the American called it Kanban. The Kanban system is really something actually originally referring to some kind of, you can call it billboard, whiteboard, blackboard, whatever it is. Basically, it's a marking, okay? So what is going on here and there? So you would see a little matrix, this, that, blah. In essence, that's the great-grandparents of the MRP and then later ERP, right? So above everything else, the ERP working, or MRP at the beginning, working in the manufacturing place, theoretically, you would have the operational capacity of your department 1, operational, capacity of department 2, and then 3, and 4, 5, and so on and so forth. The best economic overall integrated result, or the economic efficiency, would be operational efficiency best utilized. So with all this department, if they're all correlated and they're the products of this department come into a linear system, so one is actually depending on the other, right? So all the department, that could be manufacturing, and then the design and the engineering and the manufacturing, and then the logistics, from the raw material coming into the finished product going out. Of course, basically, hopefully all this capacity, each one, if you imagine each one of them is a box, so you got a bunch of boxes lining up together, and in the ideal situation, their capacity, each one of them, 100% utilized, okay? So if you have this one, like, man, I need to double the shift. So instead of 100% now, I need to go 200%. And the other one, like, actually, I still have 39% of the operation capacity unused. So you want to basically, stretch out evenly and make sure they all match. So anyway, that's basically what the MRP, or going back to the Kanban system, that was what it's all about. Okay, try to match up between the departments, right? Of course, with the operational transparency created by MRP first and then ERP later, you're supposed to be able to do that of course, that's just theory. In real world, what happens is, at least in America, okay, sales guys, they are the big brother, right? Because they bring in the orders, which turn into paychecks for everybody. So sales guys, they want to do sales. How do they do sales? A lot of American sales. I'm not talking about, excuse me, German sales or whatever other country, but in America, a lot of sales. Okay, they may depends who you ask. It could be the best sales or the worst sales. Why? Because they basically got a big mouth. Whatever their customers say, they are. Oh yeah, sure. We'll do it. Okay, they don't care. They toss the thing back to the operational people. Come back like, hey folks, you guys got to do this so I can secure the big order because we got real severe competition out there. That's a market really tough, man. You operation folks, you have no idea. Okay, so what do you think the operation VP can say to the sales VP? Say, no, it's not gonna work. You can't say that because the person is always kind of leaning towards the sales VP rather than the operation VP. So the operation VP, calling the master planner and say, hey, I'm sorry, but it just happened again. Okay, the sales guys, they don't know what the heck they're doing. As far as the operation goes, they create all this chaos, and here it is again. You need to adjust, in your ERP or MRP, the sales order. So instead of, producing this one first, you're going to do the other one first. So basically, line up your priority. And that was just the sales rep, John Smith, okay? And then another sales rep worked for the same sales department. You have married, Doe came in, and this is even bigger sales order in terms of contract value. And this, of course, gets lots of attention. And the operation VP, okay, all right, that's what we're here for, right? We're supposed to be a supportive, unit of this company. So yeah, okay. All right, so the operation VP calling the master planner again. You know what? I am really sorry. Mary just brought in a even bigger sales order, so you're gonna have to adjust your priority a little bit. Actually, the whole production capacity, big impact. So imagine all this back and forth, swapping back and forth. So that's why ERP, MRP, whatever it is, basically you keep updating and you keep changing. Do you think that master planner could actually manually control all this capacity to be best utilized in an optimized fashion? Of course not, okay? Of course that's where, supposedly AI, deep learning, all that, come into place to make a difference. But anyway, back now, we have, basically laid the ground for the environment for you to comprehend. And now KPI, right? Kanban was a KPI kind of thing. Like I said, great grandparents of all this. That was just intuitive system. You know how Japanese work. They're so neat, right? But then, not everything we in America can copy the Japanese, even though we were the one taught them how to do quality control and operation management. But now they got ahead of us, right? But not everything the Japanese experience we can replicate in America or a lot of other countries. Because imagine yourself, basically in line with a whole bunch of other co-workers, manufacturing co-workers, and your boss is there in the front, okay? Letting you do the military exercise in the morning before you start the real job. That's a team building for the Japanese. Can you do that in America? I don't think so. Personally, I'm like, are you kidding me? Am I in the military? But hey, discipline. That's what they have, man. Not in America. We don't have that kind of discipline. So the KPI for us makes even more sense because if you're German or a Japanese worker, you have different sense of professional pride. I mean, you look at your quality, thing you turn out. You have no face if that thing looks so off the standard set by yourself, right? But over here, we need a KPI. Okay, basically a mandatory standard set by the management and introduced, implemented. So what is KPI in essence? It's like in plain English, layman English. Hey, what do you think of this thing? Like, yeah, it's good, sorta, kinda. So exactly what is that? And you also, you even hear Americans say, yes, no, but what are we saying? So good American English, or American actually precisely, good Americans say, all right, on the scale 1 to 10, tell me how good you think this is. And you're like, oh, I would take 3. What is the difference between the last one and this one? This one on the scale 1 to 10 is quantitatively defined a scale, okay? The other one is just whatever, You doing okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Does that tell anything? Not really. But do really people care? No, it's just a figure of speech, man. You okay? Oh, yeah. Or do you think the other guy really want to hear the whole story? Oh, you know what? I had this big fight with my spouse this morning. You don't want to know. And talking about while we're on the subject, you know how the teenager kids, how rebellious they could be, right? I got 2 of them in my household. Do you think the other guy actually had the time to hear all your story? No, for Americans, it's just like you pass, the hallway and run into each other. You go, hey, man. And the other guy, hey. That's a very effective one. But a lot of people just say, how you doing? It's like, I really care about the answer. And the other guy, yeah, I'm okay. How you doing? Oh, yeah, I'm good. It doesn't mean anything, right? But can you really expect people to talk like a robot? Everything makes sense? No, man, this is just part of life. Why do you always have to have the meaning of everything, right? But when it comes to work, you better, because you need to communicate effectively. And at the end of the day, you want to hold people accountable, right? So now we're moving into the core content itself. Let's see. Yeah, I think I have pretty much. Okay, so let me just. So, where would we, for supply chain management purpose, where would we do our KPI, and how do we do that? Well, as far as where or what, excuse me, I warned you about my breakfast effect, after effect, whatever. So you got to have the, let's say, KPI to measure on your inventory, right? The surplus part. If the cycle is defined for each and every item is, let's say, it cannot stay in this warehousing space for random number, 6 months. And then you look at the record, right? Because you get the cycle report. First 6 months, second, third, fourth, just keep on going. Gotta solve this problem. It is recognized as a problem. So where's the solution? You guys work out a solution. So, but as your boss, I'm gonna put a KPI, okay? So this gotta be reduced to whatever number and to be kept at that level. That is a KPI for you, okay? So you cannot exceed the designated life cycle span for this thing to stay in the warehouse on the shelf, let's say not to exceed 30%. Is that reasonable? Well, depends on the specific item. But that's one KPI for you. And then, basically disposal of the surplus. Not all of those things are allowed to just give them away, but there's certain things. So you have a separate KPI for that too. And then about the transportation budget, while I was a corporate logistic, guy in charge, I called my transportation manager. The guy worked for me. He kept me in the woods all the time. And then one day, I caught that he was paying 3 times of the market rate to a truck company. And this thing, that's basically what I was hired for. If you have a transportation manager, you have a warehousing manager, what do you need the logistic manager for, right? Keep everything in check. So my job, pretty much KPI, okay? Optimize things, transportation, warehouse, and all that. So I introduced the KPI for this transportation department. This is the market rate. You cannot exceed this market rate as far as, what our company was paying to the trucking companies by a certain, percentage. And then, of course, I have to keep updating because market go, up and down. But what I'm pushing is really procurement, because you can't just, because this guy taking me to lunch every day, so I'm just going to throw my business that way. That's not right, right? So by setting up this KPI, I'm introducing and enforcing the practice of procurement of truck service in the market. And that's why when I called everybody, the trucking companies, everybody gave me this similar answer, some more polite, others more blunt. It's basically, so are you with this and that company? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, let me get back to you. That's the polite one. And the blunt one goes, I'm not going to waste my time on that company because I know you guys fixed for 40 years. Only use one trucker, and I'm not going to even tell you the rate they're paying, or you guys are paying them, okay? I'm not going to waste my time. Ooh, so I already know what happened here. So that's why you need a KPI, because you have the market, level, and you know what you're paying. You go to the accounting, or if you have the SAP or ERP, MRP, whatever, Oracle, whatever it is, you can easily find out, what accounting the account payable is paying per shipment, and you calculate it. That's the rate. And then you compare it to the market. That's how I found out we were paying 3 times higher, right? So now we know why we need the KPI. Okay, so I'm gonna move to the contents of the PowerPoint on the Blackboard system, right? What's going on? Okay. So by human nature, we mentioned this briefly before, people resist changes to get themselves out of their comfort zone, right? So when you start to introduce a KPI system, what does that mean? That means they're going to have to alter their way of practice every day, change their life routine at the workplace, because now you have the KPI and you implement it. So back then, my own bonus, at the end of the year, was tied into the KPI my boss set for me, who was the operation VP. And then, the transportation manager and the warehousing manager working for me, I set the KPI for them. So at the beginning of the year, we get, negotiate a little bit. So I would tell my boss, like, I think that's a little high. Can we do a little more practical? And he's like, okay, I'll give you a little break. We can meet halfway. And then basically the same situation, replicated between myself and my, 2 line managers. What does that mean? I mean, well, for me, I came from the GE background. I'm used to the KPIs. Okay, that's the way it is. But for the two guys working under me, that's a little tough for them because you're telling them, whatever you're doing, however you're doing, I don't care. But, ends justify means, and the ends I'm looking at, the KPI is constantly going to be adjust upward. No matter how you're doing today, it's just not good enough. Not everybody likes that, right? So that's what I mean by, it's human nature. People resist changes. So the new things, of course, nevertheless, always perceived as what? Threat. Are they going to collaborate? No. But hey, if you have the KPI and then you measure periodically and randomly, like it or not, they're going to have to basically take it. If you don't, find another job. Because that's not personally what I do. That's just the company culture already. So the corporate culture came a long way to take rules, started from the way up in how they see things and how they think about it and how they do things. And I already mentioned this in last class, every company is different. So what I didn't mention in the last class was the mid-management. Remember the line management, the senior management, or corporate management. In between is the mid-management, right? That's where I was, unfortunately, in that manufacturing place about, 15 years ago? I don't even remember. The mid-management, excuse me, no, this is the breakfast after fact. The mid-management will not do anything unless their ass kicked by their bosses. And they won't take any initiative, to change on their own. That's exactly why we need a KPI. It's basically a campaign company-wise, okay? Everybody, you all have to, live with your KPI, given by your boss, and you accept it in writing. You signed over it. This is why, we don't want to do nothing. Well, you're going to have to if you want to keep this job. So the line management do not really have the view of the whole picture, like those, the trucking manager and the warehousing manager worked under me. Did they really know the whole corporate vision, all that? They didn't care. Basically, the media management get forced by the corporate management, just basically, replicate the same down to them. And those guys, I actually got this warehousing manager told me on my first day on the job. I went in. Okay, of course, you want to get to know them because you're going to work with them. And this guy goes, we're the ones stay here. I've been here almost 40 years. And you guys are the ones that came and went. So I don't know how long you're going to be here, but hey, whatever you say, I'll do it. What he was trying to tell me is, I won't be here long. Okay, so he's just going to deal with me. I don't care, as long as the KPI works. So I'm just giving all this life story. So otherwise, it could be really boring. It kills me. What KPI was Six Sigma? Took me a lot of time to take a deep breath before I get into that thing. So I hope it's more interesting than just merely reading that stuff. So the advantage and the keys to the initiative implementation success. And this, of course, referring to the KPI thing. So the objective management by the metrics, what it is basically a metric system, right? So it's basically measurable, or measurable, actually, to be accurate. Yeah, measurable. Like I mentioned earlier, on the scale, 1 to 10, that's measurable. And you basically quantify the performances in the scale, the objective versus the subjective, right? So the KPI is to quantify the problems and the measurement of the solution for fulfillment. That's plain English, nothing fancy. And let's just say, give you an example, right, about the problem and the objective and fulfillment, all to be, quantified, measured. Let's just say overtime. Okay, in a manufacturing place, the guys, they work for $12 an hour, and they gotta pay for their house, their car, their kids, a lot of things. A lot of them have 5 kids. You think they can really survive on $12 an hour, 8 hours a day? Do your math. So my job, okay, from my boss, the operation VP, is to reduce the overtime. Ideally, mathematically, overtime should be zero, okay? But if I really bring it down to zero, I won't have anybody working for me. They're all going somewhere else who don't have this kind of KPI, okay? So what we would end up doing is train the people. When they get really experienced, they're worth the more dollars, they go to work for somebody else, okay? So we end up as a training program for other folks, our competitions. So obviously, I know my boss knew that too, because he came from this kind of background. He knows how everything works. But basically, it's just I guess the silver line, or whatever you call it, to gain the balance. It's a trade-off, between the two things. So you don't really get to the absolute mathematic, optimization. No, you don't. It doesn't work like that. But still, the KPI in this case is applied to reduce. Okay, right now we're at this level. So the first year I arrive at the post is supposed to come down by a quantifiable, margin, to come down a little bit to this level. And that's really reasonable, right? That justified my pay, from my employer. So I did that. So that's one KPI, right? By doing that, it didn't just, put the number out there. You got to have the solution, to go with that KPI. For instance, I started doing the optimization program around the warehouse, because when you do have to have a lot of overtime in a warehouse is when all the guys and gears just rushed, okay? So the first piece of business on my agenda for that was I walked around the warehouse. So before I left a notebook there at the entrance where the truck, backs into the shipping channel, and discharge or unload everything from the truck, back of the truck, into the staging space. So I left a notebook, okay, really classical, paper notebook, and a ball pen there. So I said, you guys, write down the time each truck came in every day for 7 days. I want a week. So that book later came back to me. Remember, you can't do computer thing with these guys. They don't use computer. But I look at the book. What I find out, it's a pattern. The pattern is the truck, either just on a day, like many hours, nobody show up, and then all of a sudden, boom, they all showed up. So in the warehouse, well, a lot of guys, a lot of time they didn't have nothing to do, sit there waiting for the trucks. And when the truck come here, remember in America, the space at all the manufacturing places is very, very limited, and we never had enough space. So with all this thing coming and all the labor and gear try to rush in to do it, do you think the space can actually accommodate all this? Of course not. So everybody supposedly pitched in, but they didn't get to do much because they were getting in each other's way. So all this is meaningless except for they're making the overtime, right? So what I did was look at the pattern. So I told the warehousing manager, from now on, we only receive shipments twice a day. First time in the morning, second time in the afternoon. Specifically what hour you guys decide, but it's mandatory for me. It's an order. Twice a day, at a particular time, if the truck, and I will tell the purchasing manager, to inform all those suppliers, the vendors of that. Okay, so if truck arrive here other than the appointment hour, okay, they are all gonna get certain, let's say between 9 and 11, right? You allocate this, constant supply. They go by routine. You schedule. This is what I call gate uh, appointment schedule. Okay, so I didn't explain that concept. Just told the warehousing manager, you only have one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So he did it. And then this rush pattern disappeared because basically it's what we call shaping the traffic, flatten, evenly, steadily. Pretty easy. Done it, right? So that helped me to implement the KPI. So at the end of the year, I can get my bonus, right? And my warehousing manager, him too. And of course, I didn't drop dramatically the overtime of the workers at the warehouse. They still, had a reasonable pay. I still keep the overtime for them strategically. So that was that. And then now we talk about the real 4PL work with KPIs as stipulated in their service contract. Because remember, I was a 4PL manager. In the contracts, our clients actually stipulate the service contract. This particular thing, you got to reduce in KPI by this much, by whatever specified, basically there's a span of lifetime. By that time, you're supposed to drop this, basically it's a cost control. How you make money at, revenue as a 4PL. Ideally, for both, win-win situation, you share the cost you reduced in a proportion stipulated in the contract. But that's a nosediving thing. You can do really good job in the first year, and then what about the second, third? At the end, you don't really have too much margin to work with. So I'll be honest with you, when I was a 4PL manager, I intentionally not to have a very aggressive objective because, hey, I still have to be around for a few years, right? So I will just do this much as long as my customer approved. And then next year I have this. Next year, if you do this much, next year, where am I going to put myself? I better quit my job, right? Human. So that's 4PL and KPI, right? So if you could produce better results, if the corporate senior management takes it seriously enough, because not all the time. Remember, corporate culture actually starts from the senior management. So you got to have a process flow map, basically to map out all your moves, right? Map it out. So observe the current practice and pattern, the status quo, meaning the way they do now, right? You need to observe that. And then I'm talking about how do you do the process, flow map to set up your KPI in preparation. So first you observe, the current practice, based or derived from their corporate culture. The first guy, blue collar guy, very intuitive, never probably believed in anything. Well, there's always exception, but most likely don't believe anything analytics. And they think you're just some pencil pusher. What do you know, right? When I started this business, your father was still a kid, and you come in to lecture me. That's typically what you would see. And then so after you have observed the current practice and pattern, you start interviewing with the key personnel at every node of the work process. Remember, we talked about it from point A to point Z, the whole process, each and every node. Some probably be a manager, some just entry level guy, but still you need to talk to them to understand the whole flow, because you know how it works now. What you don't know is why. Does this make sense? Why does it make sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to me? You gotta get the buy-in, okay? So that's why you interview those people. And then you describe the flow process node by node in a diagram. If you're an IT guy, you know this. You do this all the time. So find out where can be changed for better efficiency. Well, a lot of this theoretically. If you don't talk to those people and don't walk in like, oh, I know everything, you better listen. No, you should first be a good listener. Understand why they're doing what they're doing. There always has to be a good reason for the whole thing, got started in the first place. Maybe, on the way, they stop to evolve, and that's where you come in, right? But do not dismiss everything like, oh, nobody knows everything, and I am the only exception. I know everything. Okay, you just listen to me. It doesn't work like that. And so you need to find out where can be changed, but more importantly, where it practically can be changed, not just operationally, but practical. Meaning, if you got a high resistant department manager sitting right over this node, fixed against you. Maybe he doesn't like the way you look, maybe he doesn't like the way you talk, or maybe he just simply hates you for no reason. And you're supposed to change him? Not really. So if you have to do anything to change that node, at least you don't want to push a very aggressive objective. That would just make you look like, well, I'm not going to put that English word there for you. You don't want to look like that, okay? Because you are going to look very bad in front of your boss because you had this nice plan and you can't deliver, you cannot implement the plan. And it's no good for nothing. A lot of, your boss would say, oh, sounds good. Let's see how it works. That's where you're going to fail. So be very careful when you do this. And then you set up the metrics. We've got everything, basically figured out, right? By talking to people a lot frequently and being a real good listener. And so now you set up the metrics for the process and to scale the efficiencies. Because basically you're constantly doing the test, right? First, you did this. Is this metric that, set too high? Is it, practical enough? Or is it too low? People easily fulfill. What you want, ideally, is this thing is set just a little bit above where they are. So for the first year, you want them to improve a little bit. And second year, adjust a little higher. So keep them coming higher and higher. That's the ideal thing. So to get there, you will need to keep, testing, observing, and then keep adjusting to make sure you get the better efficiency. Because a lot of it's just, if it's just on the paper, it may not show you the good result that should yield or expect to yield. And you set up the metrics for the process to scale the efficiency. That is just exactly what I just said. And you set the objectives in specific KPIs to measure engineered changes. So those changes are engineered by you, right? So what do you expect out of those changes that you engineered? You gotta have objective, and you have to define that objective, right? So Six Sigma actually came in pretty handy because it's not really very sophisticated system, but it's lots of detail. Okay, it's a detail oriented. It has certain doctrine, and by doctrine by itself, nothing really that complicated. But it's the methodology that actually counts. They actually tell you exactly how to do this. As far as the doctrine, I think it's not like people cannot think, oh, it's something I've never heard of. No, it's not that. This is as a system. So for any company try to implement Six Sigma system, start with what they call championship. The president, vice president, everybody executive, okay? They got it. Step in and participate, play a role. It's called championship. And then basically train everybody at all levels you got the black belt, which I have one. Okay, and well, back at a lot of companies, they actually throw that thing away. Black belt don't mean much. Those guys, they have the certificates. Do they actually know how to practice? That's another question altogether. But then you have the master black belt. These are basically two guys engineer the whole thing. Okay, the leadership championship is basically there to support verbally. Guys, we gotta do this. Okay, I'm in business. I really do. Um, the master black belt, they design the process, how to implement, where to begin, and how to do this. And then you have the green belt. The green belt are the guys there nodding. Yup, it's right. Okay, I'll do whatever you say. That's green belt for you. I'm just dramatizing a little bit, just so that less boring, hopefully. And the methodologies, they have this thing called the fishbone and other things. But the fishbone basically dissecting the problems, one problem at a time, and I like that. And you grab the low-hanging fruits first, so you basically address the problem and show the results for the people, to boost the confidence of this whole thing, the system. Basically, in essence, just a change management, right? We talked about it before, that no change management to go along with. You don't want to make any changes because people will resist everywhere. You will be the public enemy. People, they hated each other, but they rally just, into a unified front against you because you represent the change, nevertheless, the threat. And then the company top-down culture change campaign, if that is possible. People say. And then the real impacts, right? So what it means for you, this is basically, if you took the, well, I know not in this class, but a lot of folks took MBA courses. So MBA is basically going up to 3,000 feet high level, have the big picture, right? So the perspective is much more strategic. Six Sigma, just the other way around. Drop down to the ground level, zero. Okay? Dealing with very, very particular problems and one at a time. So dissecting is the key word. So I would say this, with my, management experience, I would say you want to get a strategic, to get the big picture in a perspective. MBA helps you, okay? Sort out the problems in perspectives at a high level, right? That's what a manager is, or a certain level of manager is. And then if you are the expert solving problems, not really at the corporate level, but whatever it is, very practical operational level, you gotta look at the specific things, and that's where Six Sigma come in. So we covered all that. Now, all these certificates about Six Sigma, what do you think it is? If you ask me personally, I think it's a new thinking box out of the old box. Meaning, before they received this training, they were all in the old box. After this training, they just cage themselves in a new box, which is called Six Sigma. Why do I say that? What does that mean? That means you don't believe one thing and one thing only is the only answer to all the problems. Nah. It's a very good reference. It is very, very good. But don't just think inside that box, the new box, even though you're out of the old box, but you trap yourself in a new box. That's not good either. So I would say this MBA sort doesn't have to be MBA, just more strategic level, the big picture. So don't, I guess, get yourself lost in the details. You do need to stay on the detail, but not all the way through, because then you lose the perspective. Okay, you got sucked into. You do need to solve the specific problem, but don't get sucked into any specific problem, losing the big picture. That's what I try to say. And So perhaps set some KPIs on your own career. This is basically leader exercise. Let's say you are going, we are actually 10 minutes into the hour or bottom of the hour. So um, let's say for the practice purpose, you set some KPI for your objective, set for your career development or professional development. The KPI is the first year upon my graduation from this UHSCMT program, okay, within the first 12 months, I want to learn certain thing that is required as the job skill set, okay? And I don't have in it. I'll just pick something. For instance, you went into a manufacturing place as the somehow supply chain related. Could be procurement, could be logistics, and they talk a lot of things in acronym, and you have no idea what the heck are they talking about. Is it English? Every letter is, but put together, you don't know what it means. So you give yourself the first 6 months. You gotta learn all this acronym, not just what they mean literally, but the context, the whole thing, so that you don't stay foreign, look stupid, in front of those older guys and ladies for 6 months. Excuse me again. That's your first KPI, right? And then so you review and examine the whole thing first month, second month, towards 6 months. Are you how much in percentage you're achieving? Let's say of course you can't really collect all of them, but in a rough scope, let's say 30 acronyms. And so the first 2 weeks, oof, you got 2 really figured out. Stuff like that. I'm just throwing some random. Or let's say you have a temper control problem, okay? You easily lose it, and it's gonna hurt your career because your boss is gonna hate your guts and doesn't really want to see you anywhere near him or her, and your coworkers basically, what is it? Just don't want to talk to you. So you can put some KPI, right? The first month, I lost it 3 times. Second month, 2 times. And then third month, 1 time. And 4 months, 0. You're achieving. Okay, that's KPI for you. Things of that nature. I've just stopped, throwing examples for you. So let me review, make sure I got everything covered here, because I want to clock out right on the hour. Okay, I pretty much covered everything. So KPI, you can easily design. After all this, I believe you should be able to design, because I just gave you the easy stuff. But at first, you need to quantify, okay, down to the numbers. And 2, you need to review, examine the fulfillment of those, little objectives you set, and work the numbers, right? At the beginning of our class, I declared, I went to 2 maritime academies, and I do speak maritime terms. If I want to set up KPI against that, to make myself sound more professional with less vivid, lively words, of English, I should set up KPI. Just an example, right? It's like, in the class, I only use the maritime term. I allow myself the first, let's say, month, okay? No more than 10 maritime terms, okay? And then the next stage, let's say next month, no more than 5 times, okay? And then I compare. Did I achieve 10 the first month? And then did I achieve 5 the second month? That's KPI in essence, okay? So at the end, I find out, by the end of the semester, I did not use any maritime term, like, in the recorded video. Did I use one time? Maybe once, I don't remember. But hey, very significant improvement right there, right? So did I set up the KPI? I didn't, but I could. And if I did, I will deserve a big reward for the accomplishment by throwing another 100 maritime terms right now. The liberty to celebrate, right? Oh, that defeated the whole purposes. But of course, that's a joke. I don't know if you find that funny. So anyway, that's KPI. And after this class, you still tell me you don't know how to set KPI. What does that mean? How it works? Shame on you. Now, here's the key part you don't want to miss. For the SA2, you're selling what? 4PL. What does 4PL need? KPI. When you sell 4PL services to the 1PL, you imagined, fabricated, you need to talk about why 4PL is the one who can do what 3PL would never be able to do, and why would this 1PL, your customer or customer candidate, need 4PL, okay? The KPI. And imagine if this customer does not have the Six Sigma already implemented, do they have KPI in place? If they don't, how do you prove your KPI working with them? That's a challenge. So what does that tell you? You need to pick the customer who's already KPI implemented for their own operation. So your KPI with their KPI, they kind of integrate into one system. Remember, 4PL is insourcing, right? You need to learn their KPI, their best practice based SOP before you propose yours to marry into it, okay? So in your proposal, you've got to do this interview I just mentioned earlier, okay, with their people before you can propose. Otherwise, you don't think the boss of that big company has been around? They actually could not smell your BS? By that, I don't mean your bachelor's degree. You know what it means. I'm resisting my, the attempt to give you the maritime term. So anyway, we are 2 minutes, 20 seconds away from wrapping up right on the clock. That's my KPI for this class. Okay, right on the clock. Let's see if I can do it. So in your essay number 2, you pitch your 4PL, and you have to tell the 1PL, because you have to presume there are other 4PLs out there competing for the same service contract. So where do you think yours would stand out? What is the feature that you offer and actually differentiate yourself from any other 4PL services? You've got to have that. I'm expecting that. You do not want to lose this part of the grade, okay? Because after all, it's only fair. You learn things, and I'm testing how much you learned, and you need to show me. And that is essay number 2, okay? So if you have any questions, drop them at the chat board with your own thread, or you can just send email to me, and I can address them in the Q&A session, the Zoom, over Zoom, and all that stuff. But if you have no question, automatically the presumption is you know everything already. Okay, so we're right on the clock, and we will say bye.